welcome to the deep dive. Today we're getting into something really foundational for computer security, the cryptographic building blocks.
That's right. And this is essential stuff, whether you're just starting out or you're already pretty deep into cybersecurity, maybe following along on the InfoSecTube channel.
Absolutely. Think of these as the core tools, the mechanisms used everywhere to protect information online. We're going to be dissecting the key ideas from the chapter, Cryptographic Building Blocks.
And our goal here is to make it really clear, step by step, give you a solid understanding you can use for self-study with practical examples.
Yeah, because this isn't just theory. Knowing how encryption, signatures, all that, how it actually works, that's key to using security tools properly.
And maybe even more importantly, knowing what not to do.
They're trying to invent your own crypto. Big no-no.
Definitely a big no-no. So yeah, we'll cover encryption, symmetric, public key, digital signatures, hash functions, message authentication, the whole lot.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Hey, if you find this useful, if you want more deep dives like this into cybersecurity, do us a favor, hit like and subscribe to the InfoSecTube channel. Okay, let's jump in. First building block, encryption. What is it, fundamentally?
Okay, so at its heart, encryption is about taking readable information, we call that plaintext, and transforming it into something unintelligible, which we call ciphertext.
Like scrambling it up.
Pretty much. You use a specific method, an algorithm, and secret ingredient, a key, to do the scrambling.
And the key is the important secret part.
Exactly. Decryption is just reversing that process. You use the right decryption key and the algorithm to turn the ciphertext back into the original plaintext. And here's a crucial point. The security hinges on keeping the key secret, not the algorithm.
Ah, right. Good crypto algorithms are usually public knowledge, aren't they? So experts can poke holes in them if there are any.
Precisely. It's called the open design principle. Security through obscurity, keeping the method secret, that generally doesn't work well long term. The key is the thing.
Makes sense. So you need to protect that key. And this whole process is why we encrypt sensitive stuff before sending it, right? Because you have to assume someone might be listening in.
Or even trying to change the data. Yeah, the threat landscape has evolved. It's not just external attackers anymore. You have to worry about malware on your own devices, too.
Okay, so maybe an example would help. The Caesar cipher comes up a lot in intro explanations.
Ah, yes, good old Caesar. Very simple. The algorithm is just shifting letters in the alphabet by a fixed amount, usually 3 places.
So A becomes D, B becomes E.
Exactly. And you wrap around, so X becomes A, Y becomes B, Z becomes C. Mathematically, if you number the letters 0 to 25, encryption is like letter number plus 3, mod 26.
Yeah, mod 26 just keeps it looping around the alphabet.
Right. And decryption is just the opposite. Letter number 3, mod 26. The key here is simply the shift amount, which is 3 in the classic example.
Okay, pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
But how many possible keys are there? How many different shifts could Caesar have used?
Well, only 25 useful ones, really. Shifting by 1, 2, up to 25 letters. A shift of 0 or 26 does nothing.
And that's its weakness, right? Only 25 keys. Easy to just try them all.
Trivial, exactly. That's a brute force attack. You just try every key until the message makes sense.
So when we talk about all these pieces, the plaintext, the ciphertext, the set of possible keys, the encryption method, the decryption method is what we call a crypto system.
Yep, that's the formal term. A crypto system defines all those components. And crucially, decrypting the ciphertext with the correct key must always give you back the original plaintext.
Got it. So if an attacker gets the ciphertext but not the key, and assuming the algorithm isn't fundamental break-in, their only option is that brute force thing, trying every single key.
That's the idea, yes, an exhaustive key search. If the crypto is well designed, there shouldn't be any clever shortcuts. You just have to grind through all the possibilities.
Which, for modern crypto, should take an impossibly long time.
That's the goal. If you have, say, a 128-bit key, that's 2 to the power of 128 possible keys. That number is, well, it's astronomically huge.
Hard to even imagine.
Think about it this way. Even if you could test billions of keys per second, checking all 2,128 keys would take vastly longer than the current age of the universe. That's why we need large key spaces.
Right. But older systems like DES, they had smaller keys, didn't they?
They did. DES used a 56-bit key, so 2 to the power of 56 possibilities. Still a very big number back in the 70s.
But not big enough now.
Not anymore. There's this great analogy. Imagine every possible 56-bit DES key is a golf ball. Now imagine filling a massive highway, say Los Angeles to New York, hundreds of lanes wide, piled hundreds of layers deep with these golf balls. Only one of them is painted black. That's the correct key.
Whoa.
Finding it by checking one by one seems impossible, right? But with modern computing power, finding that one black golf ball in the 56-bit pile is actually feasible for determined attackers. That's why DES is considered broken now. We need much, much larger key spaces, like 128 bits or more for AES.
That golf ball highway really puts it in perspective. Okay, so besides just having the ciphertext, are there different ways attackers might try to break encryption? Different scenarios?
Yes, we talk about different attack models based on what the attacker knows or can do. The simplest is a ciphertext-only attack. They just have the encrypted message.
Okay.
Then there's a known plaintext attack.
Mm-hmm.
They have some ciphertext and the corresponding original plaintext. Maybe they found an old unencrypted version. More powerful is a chosen plaintext attack. Here, the attacker can choose plaintexts, get them encrypted with the secret key, and see the resulting ciphertexts. They're actively probing the system.
Trying to figure out the key by seeing how specific inputs get encrypted.
Exactly. And even stronger is a chosen ciphertext attack. They can choose ciphertexts and get the decrypted plaintext back, again, trying to deduce the key or find weaknesses. A good cipher needs to resist all of these.
Makes sense. The more the attacker can interact, the harder it is to stay secure. And what about passive versus active attackers?
A passive attacker just listens, eavesdrops. They collect ciphertext but don't interfere. Ciphertext only and known plaintext are usually passive.
Just watching.
Right. An active attacker, though, they mess with things. They might change messages, inject fake ones, try to trick the system. Chosen plaintext and chosen ciphertext attacks usually involve an active adversary.
Got it. Okay, let's focus on a specific type. Symmetric key encryption. What's the symmetric part about?
Symmetric means the same key is used for both encrypting and decrypting. Alice uses key K to encrypt. Bob needs the exact same key K to decrypt, like one physical key for locking and unlocking a door.
Okay. And you mentioned the Vernum cipher as an example, a stream cipher.
Yes, Vernum is a classic stream cipher. It works bit by bit. You take each bit of your plaintext and XOR it with the corresponding bit from a secret key stream. The result is the ciphertext bit.
XOR, that's the exclusive OR operation.
Correct. And the neat thing about XOR is that if you XOR the ciphertext bit with the same key bit again, you get the original plaintext bit back. So decryption is the same operation.
But the key has to be as long as the message.
For the pure Vernum cipher, yes. And if that key is truly random, generated securely, and never used again for another message, that's called a one-time pad.
The unbreakable cipher, right?
Theoretically, yes. Perfect confidentiality. Because for any ciphertext you see, there is a possible key that could have turned any plaintext of the same length into that ciphertext. So the ciphertext gives you zero information about the original message.
Wow. So why aren't we using one-time pads everywhere?
The practicalities are killers.
Yeah.
First, you need a truly random key as long as your entire message. Second, you have to securely get that massive key to the recipient before you send the message.
Oh. If you have a secure way to send the key, couldn't you just send the message that way?
Exactly. That's the paradox. And third, you absolutely cannot reuse the key, not even a part of it, ever. Managing and distributing these huge, unique keys securely is just incredibly difficult in practice.
Okay, so impractical for most things.
Yeah.
You also mentioned a weakness with integrity, even for a one-time pad.
Yes, this is crucial. Perfect confidentiality doesn't mean perfect integrity. Imagine your salary is encrypted with a one-time pad. An attacker intercepts the ciphertext. They don't know the key. They can't read your salary.
Right.
But they can flip bits in the ciphertext. Let's say they flip a specific bit from 0 to 1. When the recipient decrypts with the correct key, that same bit flip happens in the plaintext.
So they could change my salary without even knowing what it was. Maybe give me a massive raise by flipping a high-order bit.
Precisely. And the decryption process itself won't detect this tampering. The one-time pad provides no way to verify if the message was altered. That's why encryption alone isn't enough. You usually need integrity protection, too.
That's a really important point. So the symmetric ciphers we use in the real world, they aren't theoretically unbreakable like a one-time pad.
Correct. They rely on computational security. We design them so that breaking them, typically by trying all the keys, is computationally infeasible within any reasonable time frame, given current and foreseeable computing power. But they aren't information theoretically secure like a one-time pad.
Okay. And we mentioned stream ciphers like Vernum. The other main type is block ciphers.
Right. Stream ciphers work on small units, like bits or bytes, sequentially. Block ciphers work on fixed-size chunks of data, called blocks. A common block size is 128 bits.
So it takes 128 bits of plaintext, uses the key, and outputs 128 bits of ciphertext.
Essentially, yes. It applies a complex transformation to the whole block at once. If your message is longer than one block, you apply the cipher repeatedly.
What if the message isn't an exact multiple of the block size? Like you have some leftover bits at the end.
Good question. That's where padding comes in. You need to add extra bits to the last partial block to make it a full block. There are standard ways to do this so the receiver knows how to remove the padding after decryption.
Like adding a 1 bit and then a bunch of nurs.
That's one common method, yes. It ensures you can always tell where the original message ended and the padding began.
Got it. And the main block cipher used today is AES.
Yes, AES Advanced Encryption Standard. It was chosen by NIST, the U.S. standards body, after a big international competition around 2001. Very widely used, very well trusted.
Okay. Now, when AES encrypts a block, is the ciphertext block the same size as the plaintext block? Is it length preserving?
The basic AES block cipher operation itself is yes. 128-bit input gives 128-bit output, but as we discussed with the one-time pad, just encrypting isn't usually enough. You need integrity.
Right, the tampering protection.
And when you add mechanisms for integrity like an authentication tag, that usually adds a little bit of extra data. So the final protected message might be slightly longer than the original plaintext.
Okay, a small expansion for a lot more security. You also mentioned modes of operation for block ciphers, like ECB. Why do we need different modes?
Modes of operation are recipes for using a block cipher securely on messages longer than a single block. The simplest is ECB, electronic codebook. You just encrypt each block independently with the same key.
Sounds easy. What's the catch?
The catch is huge. If you have identical plaintext blocks anywhere in your message, they will encrypt to identical ciphertext blocks using ECB.
Ah, so patterns in the plaintext can leak through into the ciphertext.
Exactly. The famous example is encrypting an image, like a logo, with ECB. If there are areas of solid color, those identical pixel blocks encrypt identically, and you can often still see the outline of the logo in the encrypted image. It's generally very insecure.
Yikes. Definitely want to avoid ECB then. What are better alternatives?
Common secure modes include CBC, cipher block chaining, and CTR, counter mode. In CBC, each plaintext block is XOR'd with the previous ciphertext block before being encrypted.
So each ciphertext block depends on all the blocks before it.
Right. This chaining breaks the pattern leakage of ECB. Identical plaintext blocks will encrypt differently depending on their position in the message. It uses something called an initialization vector, or VIV, for the very first block.
Okay, that sounds much better. What about CTR mode?
CTR mode is interesting. It basically turns the block cipher into a stream cipher. Instead of encrypting the plaintext directly, you encrypt a counter value that increments for each block.
You encrypt the counter.
Yes. You encrypt the counter value, starting with a unique initial value called a nonce, and then you XOR the result of that encryption with the plaintext block to get the ciphertext block.
Huh. So you only use the block cipher in the encryption direction, even for decryption.
Correct. To decrypt, you do the same thing. Encrypt the same sequence of counter values and XOR the result with the ciphertext blocks. It recovers the plaintext. CTR is also nice because you can encrypt or decrypt blocks in parallel, which can be faster.
Fascinating. So the key takeaway is, don't just pick a cipher like AES. You also need to pick a secure mode of operation like CBC or CTR, and definitely not ECB.
Absolutely. And as we keep saying, in almost all real-world cases, you need more than just confidentiality. You need integrity, too. Which brings us to authenticated encryption.
We'll get there. But first, let's switch tracks to the other major type, public key encryption. How is this different from symmetric?
The big difference is keys. In symmetric, it's one shared secret key. In public key, or asymmetric encryption, everyone gets a pair of keys. A public key and a private key.
Two keys. How do they work?
They're mathematically linked. What one key encrypts, only the other key in the pair can decrypt. But crucially, you can't figure out the private key just by knowing the public key.
Okay, and the names give it away. Public key is public.
Exactly. You can share your public key freely with anyone. Your private key, though, you must keep absolutely secret. Only you should have it.
So if I want to send you a secret message using public key crypto,
you would need my public key. You'd use my public key and the public key encryption algorithm to encrypt your message. Then you send me the ciphertext.
And only you can decrypt it.
Right, because only I have the corresponding private key that's mathematically linked to the public key you used. Anyone else who intercepts it, even if they know my public key, can't decrypt it without my private key.
Clever. So anyone can lock the message using my public key, but only I have the private key to unlock it.
That's the essence of it.
But wait, how do I know the public key I got is really yours? What if someone, let's call her Charlene, tricks me into using her public key instead?
That is the absolute million-dollar question. Public key integrity and authenticity are critical. If Charlene can pull off that swap...
Then I encrypt my message, thinking it's for you, but using her key.
Exactly. She intercepts it, decrypts it with her private key, reads it, maybe changes it, re-encrypts it with your actual public key, and sends it on.
A man-in-the-middle attack, and neither of us would know.
Potentially, yes. So just having a public key isn't enough. You need some way to trust that it genuinely belongs to the person you think it does. This is a huge challenge.
How do we solve that?
That's where things like digital certificates and certification authorities, CAs, come in. We'll touch on those later. It's about building chains of trust.
Okay, so assuming we can trust the public keys, what about key management? Is public key better than symmetric when lots of people need to communicate?
Oh, much better, usually. Think about symmetric keys. If you have N people and everyone needs to talk securely to everyone else, each pair needs a unique shared key.
How many keys is that?
The number grows really fast. It's N times N1 divided by 2. For 100 people, that's nearly 5,000 secret keys to manage.
Wow, that's a nightmare.
It really is. But with public key crypto, each person just needs their own pair. One public, one private. So for N people, you only need N key pairs in total. Much, much more scalable.
That's a huge advantage for large systems like the internet. So public key solves key distribution, but is it as fast as symmetric for the actual encryption?
No, generally not. Public key operations involve more complex math, so they tend to be significantly slower than symmetric algorithms like AES, especially for large amounts of data.
So what do? Use public key for some things and symmetric for others?
Exactly. That leads to hybrid encryption. You use the slower public key method just to securely exchange a temporary random symmetric key, often called a session key.
Ah, so you use public key crypto just to agree on a secret key for this one conversation.
Precisely. Once both sides have that shared session key, they switch to a fast symmetric cipher like AES, using that key to encrypt the rest of the actual data. It's a best of both worlds.
Public key for the secure handshake, symmetric for the heavy lifting. Makes sense. And RSA is a common public key algorithm used for this.
Yes, RSA is one of the oldest and most famous, named after its inventors, Ruvest, Shamir, and Adelman.
How does RSA work in simple terms?
Okay, high level. Your public key is a pair of numbers, EN, and your private key is DN. The N is the same in both, and it's a huge number made by multiplying two massive secret prime numbers, P and Q.
Primes are key here.
Very much so. The difficulty of factoring the big number and back into its original primes, P and Q, is what underlies RSA's security. The E, public exponent, and ND, private exponent, are related mathematically through P and Q in a special way based on number theory.
Okay, don't need all the math details, but the idea is they're linked. But finding D from E and N is super hard without knowing P and Q.
That's the core idea. To encrypt a message M, represented as a number smaller than N, you calculate ciphertext C equals me mod N.
Raise the message to the power of E, then find the remainder when divided by N.
Correct. And to decrypt, the person with the private key, DEAN, calculates message M equals CD mod N.
Raise the ciphertext to the power of D modulo N, and you get the original message back.
Yeah. The math just works out because of how E, D, P, and Q are related.
And doing these calculations with numbers that are thousands of bits long that need special software.
Absolutely. You need big number libraries like OpenSSL provides to handle arithmetic on such massive integers.
You included a tiny example in the notes using really small primes like 5 and 7.
Yeah, just to illustrate the mechanics. With P5Q7 and N385, you can pick a public E, like E5, calculate the private D, which also happens to be 5 in this tiny case, unusually, and encrypt a small message, like M2.
So 25 mod 35 is 32 mod 35, which is 32. That's the ciphertext.
Right. And then to decrypt, 325 mod 35, if you calculate that out, it's a big number, but manageable. The remainder modulo 35 turns out to be 2. You get the original message back.
Cool. trying that out, or the slightly bigger P11, Q13 example.
Yeah.
Seems like a great way for folks doing self-study to really get a feel for it.
Definitely recommend it. And hey, if you enjoy these kinds of hands-on examples and want more, you know what to do. Like and subscribe to InfoSecTube.
All right, moving on. Next building block,
Mm-hmm.
digital signatures. What's their purpose?
Digital signatures are all about providing trust in digital documents. They give you three main things: data origin authentication, who sent it, data integrity, has it been changed, and non-repudiation, can the sender deny sending it.
Okay, so it's like a real-world signature, but with stronger guarantees. How does it work?
It uses public key cryptography again, but kind of in reverse. The sender uses their private key and the message content to generate a signature, which is a small piece of data attached to the message.
Private key to sign. Okay.
Then anyone can use the sender's public key to verify that signature. If the verification works, it confirms the message came from the owner of that private key and hasn't been altered since it was signed.
And that non-repudiation part,
Yeah.
why is that a big deal compared to, say, the MACs we'll discuss later?
Non-repudiation means the sender can't easily deny signing the message later, because only they should have the private key needed to create the signature, and anyone can verify it with the public key.
So you can prove to a third party that they signed it.
That's the idea. With MACs, as we'll see, the key is shared between sender and receiver, so the receiver could have created the MA themselves. You lose that strong proof for third parties.
Got it. But are there practical issues with non-repudiation?
Well, it relies heavily on the signer keeping their private key absolutely secure. If my private key gets stolen, someone else could sign things as me, and I might then try to repudiate those signatures. It hinges on good key protection.
Which is why secure key management is so vital.
Yeah.
You mentioned InfoSecTube might cover that more later.
We definitely could. It's a critical topic. So yeah, if you're interested, liking and subscribing helps us know what topics to prioritize.
Okay, so walk us through the signing and verification process. Alice wants to sign message M.
Right. Alice uses her private signing key, let's call it SA, and a signing algorithm S. She computes the signature tag TAASSM. She sends both M and TA to Bob.
Bob receives message M and tag TA. How does he verify?
Bob uses Alice's public verification key, VA, and the verification algorithm V. He checks VVA, like TA. The algorithm V outputs either valid or invalid.
Valid means it likely came from Alice and is unchanged.
Correct. Invalid means something's wrong, wrong key, altered message, or corrupted signature.
It's like checking a wax seal on a letter against a known crest.
Good analogy. And like with MNCs, sometimes you need extra stuff like timestamps to prevent someone from just replaying an old, validly signed message.
What if Alice wants both confidentiality and a signature for Bob?
Yeah.
Encrypt and sign.
Very common need. The standard advice is sign first, then encrypt. Alice signs them with her private key SA to get TA. Then she encrypts both M and TA together using Bob's public encryption key.
So Bob decrypts first with his private key, gets M and TA, then verifies TA on using Alice's public key.
Exactly. Sign then encrypt is generally preferred. It confirms origin and integrity before revealing the content.
Makes sense. You also stressed using distinct terms, signing, verifying versus encrypting, decrypting. Why is that important?
Because using sloppy language like encrypting with the private key for signing is misleading. It suggests the operations are the same or that you can just use the same key pair for both.
But you should.
It's much safer practice to use separate key pairs. One pair dedicated to signing verification, another pair for encryption-decryption. While some algorithms like RSA can technically support both with the same keys, the requirements and security details are different. Using clear terms like private signing key, public verification key, public encryption key, private decryption key avoids confusion and potential vulnerabilities.
Good point. Precision matters in crypto. Now, signatures often use hash functions for efficiency. Let's talk hashes.
Right. Cryptographic hash functions are workhorses. They take any input data message, file, anything of any size, and produce a fixed size output string, the hash value. Think of it as a digital fingerprint or digest.
Fixed size output, regardless of input size.
Yep. And critically, they have special security properties. They must be one-way. Easy to compute the hash from the input, but computationally infeasible to find the input if you only know the hash.
Like the blender analogy, easy to make applesauce, impossible to get the original apple back from the sauce.
Exactly. Also, a tiny change in the input should completely and unpredictably change the output hash. That's the avalanche effect or diffusion.
Okay, so one-wingness and diffusion. What other properties?
3 main security goals. 1, One-way pre-image resistance, given hash h x, hard to find x2. Second pre-image resistance, given input x, hard to find a different input y such that hy equals hx. 3. Collision resistance, hard to find any two different inputs x and y such that h is x equals hy.
Collision resistance seems like the hardest to achieve, finding any two inputs that hash to the same value.
It is generally the strongest property, yes. Which property is most critical depends on how you're using the hash. For password storage, one-wayness is key. For digital signatures, collision resistance is usually desired.
And computationally infeasible, again, means practically impossible with current tech.
Pretty much. Takes way too long, costs way too much money or energy. The attack just isn't practical.
And you also warned, don't design your own hash functions.
Absolutely not. It's incredibly difficult to get right, full of subtle pitfalls. Always use standardized, well-vetted hash functions recommended by experts like the SHA-2 or SHA-3 families. Leave it to the pros. And hey, if you appreciate learning about these crucial details, support InfoSecTube with a like and subscribe.
Sound advice. So how are hashes used in practice? Give us an example.
File integrity is a big one. When you download software, they often provide a SHA-256 hash. You download the file, compute its hash yourself, and compare. If they match, the file wasn't corrupted or tampered with during download.
Like checking that digital seal is intact. What else?
Password storage. Systems should never store your actual password. Instead, they store a hash of your password. When you log in, they hash the password you type and compare it to the stored hash.
So even if hackers steal the database of hashes, they don't get the actual passwords.
Correct. They'd have to try and crack the hashes, which is much harder than having the plaintext passwords. Though they do try using things like rainbow tables, which is why using strong hashes and salting is important.
Sure.
Adding a unique random value to each password before hashing it makes pre-computed attacks like rainbow tables much less effective.
Okay. Now, what's this birthday paradox, and how does it relate to hash collisions?
The birthday paradox is a fun probability puzzle. How many people do you need in a room to have a better than 50% chance that at least two share a birthday?
I guess maybe 100, 180.
Surprisingly, it's only about 23.
Wow, really? Why so low?
Because you're looking for any matching pair, not a match for one specific birthday. The number of possible pairs grows much faster than the number of people.
Okay. How did that apply to hashes?
It means finding any two inputs that produce the same hash output, a collision, is statistically much easier than finding an input that matches a specific, predetermined hash output, a pre-image.
Easier by how much?
Roughly, if a hash has n possible outputs, you only need to test about the square root of n inputs to have a decent chance of finding a collision. This is called a birthday attack.
So the hash output needs to be long enough that even the square root of the possibilities is a huge, unmanageable number.
Exactly. That's why modern hashes like SHA-256 with 200 and 256 possible outputs are considered collision resistant against birthday attacks. The square root is still astronomically large, 2128.
Got it. So back to digital signatures, how do hashes make them efficient?
Instead of signing the entire potentially massive message with the slow public key operation, you first compute a fast cryptographic hash of the message. You get a short, fixed-size hash value.
You sign the hash instead of the message.
Precisely. You sign the much smaller hash using your private key. The recipient gets the message, the signature, computes the hash of the message themselves, and then uses your public key to verify the signature against the hash they just computed.
Much faster. But the hash function absolutely must be collision resistant for this to be safe.
Critically important. If an attacker could find two messages, one innocent, one malicious, with the same hash, they could get you to sign the innocent one's hash, then attach that signature to the malicious message. Ouch.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. We've covered encryption, signatures, hashes. What about message authentication codes, or MACs?
MACs are another way to ensure integrity and authenticity. Like a signature, they provide data integrity, no tampering, and data origin authentication, who sent it.
How do they work?
A MAC algorithm uses not just the message, but also a shared secret key between the sender and receiver to produce a tag. It's essentially a keyed hash function.
Shared secret key, like symmetric encryption.
Yes, exactly. Alice and Bob share a secret MC key. Alice computes the MAC tag for her message using the key, sends the message and the tag. Bob uses the same shared key to recompute the MS on the received message. If his computed tag matches the one Alice sent, he trusts the message is intact and came from someone with the key, presumably Alice.
But you said MAs don't give non-repudiation like signatures do. Why not?
Because the key is shared, Bob has the key too. So if there's a dispute, Bob can't prove to a third party that Alice generated the MAC because he could have generated it himself using their shared key.
Ah, right. Signatures use the sender's private key, which only they should have, and MACs use a key known by both sender and receiver.
That's the fundamental difference regarding non-repudiation.
How do you actually generate and check an end key?
Let M be the MC algorithm, K be the shared key. Alice computes tag T, MKM. She sends M and T. Bob receives M and T, computes check, MK, MKM. If T equals check, the verification passes.
And again, you might need things like sequence numbers to stop replay attacks.
Yes, replay protection is often needed in addition to the MHA itself.
Are there common MAC algorithms?
Sure. HMAC is very common. It uses a standard hash function like SHA-256 underneath, so you'd see HMAC SHA-256. There's also CMAC, based on block ciphers like AES, and specialized ones like Polyfree 305, often paired with stream ciphers. Even CBC mode can be adapted into CBC-MC.
Lots of options. Okay, so we have encryption for confidentiality, and MAs are signatures for integrity and authentication. What about doing both at the same time?
That brings us to authenticated encryption, or AE. The idea is simple. You almost always want both confidentiality and integrity authentication together. AE schemes are designed to provide both securely.
So it's a combined operation.
Often, yes. While you could just encrypt then MC separately, called generic composition, it's generally better and safer to use integrated AE modes designed specifically for the job. They often handle key usage more securely, allowing a single key for both confidentiality and integrity within that specific mode.
Example.
AES GCM, Galois counter mode, is very popular and efficient. Tractor-20 Poly 5305 is another excellent AAE scheme.
AED, what's the AD part?
Associated data. Sometimes you have data, like packet headers, that needs to be authenticated for integrity but cannot be encrypted because routers need to read it. AEE modes let you encrypt the main payload while also authenticating unencrypted associated data alongside it. Very practical.
Like CCM mode you mentioned earlier.
Sure.
Counter mode with CBCMA.
Exactly. CCM is an AEAD mode often used with AES, and Tractor-20 Poly 3305 is also an AEE scheme, great when you don't have hardware AES acceleration. These combined modes are really the standard for modern symmetric encryption, and naturally, for deeper dives into specific modes like GCM or Tachali, InfoSecTube is the place to subscribe.
Definitely sounds like advanced territory. Okay, almost wrapping up. Let's quickly hit certificates, elliptic curves, and key lengths. What are certificates for?
Certificates solve that public key trust problem we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
How do you know a public key really belongs to, say, Google.com?
Right, the man-in-the-middle risk.
A certificate is a data structure signed by a trusted third party, a certification authority, CA. It binds an identity, like a website name or email address, to a specific public key.
So the CA vouches for the key ownership.
Essentially, yes. Your browser trusts a set of root CAs. When you visit a secure website, it presents a certificate signed by a CA your browser trusts. Your browser verifies the CA's signature on the certificate using the CA's public key. If it checks out, you have some assurance the website's public key is legitimate. Certificates also have validity periods and ways to be revoked if compromised.
Okay, so CAs are like digital notaries for public keys. Now, key lengths. You said longer isn't always stronger, like with triple DES?
Right. Security strength is measured in bits, estimating resistance to the best known attacks. Triple DES uses 168 bits of key material, but due to attacks, its effective strength is only about 112 bits. You need all crypto components in a system to have comparable strength.
And why do public key algorithms like RSA
Random key as long as you're in
keys than symmetric ones like AES
key and
strength?
because the attacks are different. AES's main threat is brute force key search, trying all keys. For RSA and similar systems like Diffie-Hellman, the best attacks involve number theory factoring large numbers for RSA, solving discrete logarithms for DH.
And those math problems can be solved faster than brute force.
Significantly faster, relatively speaking. So to get, say, 112 bits of security strength, you might need a 112-bit symmetric key, but you'd need a 2048-bit RSA or DH key. To get 128 bits of strength, you need a 128-bit AES, but maybe a 3072-bit RSA key.
Big difference. What about elliptic curve cryptography, ECC?
ECC is another type of public key crypto based on the math of elliptic curves. Its big advantage is efficiency. It provides the same security strength as RSA, but with much smaller key sizes.
Smaller keys mean faster operations, less storage.
Generally, yes. A 256-bit ECC key gives roughly the same security as a 372-bit RSA key or 128-bit AES. That's huge for things like mobile devices or embedded systems.
Any downsides?
Sometimes the public key operations in ECC, like verification, can be a bit slower than the private key ones, which might be the opposite of some RSA setups. But the overall benefits usually outweigh that. It's very widely used now. We mostly stuck to RSA examples for simplicity today, though. Want an ECC deep dive? Let us know on InfoSecTube.
It sounds like a plan.
Okay.
That was a lot of ground covered.
Indeed. Encryption, symmetric and public key, digital signatures, hash functions, MACs, authenticated encryption, certificates, key links, the core building blocks.
And the big takeaway.
Don't roll your own crypto, seriously. Use standard, well-vetted libraries and algorithms designed by experts.
Absolutely critical advice. Hopefully this deep dive gave you a solid foundation if you're doing self-study. Use this as a jumping-off point to explore areas that caught your interest.
For sure.
And one final thought to leave you with. We talked about key links needed today. But with computing power always increasing, maybe even quantum computers on the horizon, how do these recommendations need to change? How do we keep crypto secure in the future? Something to think about.
A very important question indeed. Post-quantum cryptography is a whole field of research right now.
Exactly. Well, that's all the time we have. If you found this deep dive valuable, please hit that like button and subscribe to the InfoSecTube channel for more explorations into the world of cybersecurity. Thanks for joining us.